welcome. My name is Lenore Levat. I am actually one of the founding committee members of C3 involved in this project for the past 4 years. I hope you guys have been finding this really interesting so far this morning or afternoon. If a lot of head nods, that's a good sign. We definitely want all of your feedback. I'm going to also make a request if you can silence your phones, please, so we don't get any interruptions. And I also want to let you know that towards the end of the discussion, we're going to open up for Q&A, about 10, maybe 15 minutes. But we also ask that you're very respectful of our speakers. Please don't make it statements, make it questions so that we can actually have a good discussion. So today, welcome. This is the session called Going Broad and Deep with Zionism. And we have with us two very distinguished leaders in this area, Professor Gill and Avraham Infeld. They are two of the living giants of modern Zionism and Jewish people. Professor Gill is a prolific author, historian, and commentator. His latest book, released this past spring, is called Zionist Ideas, Visions for the Jewish Homeland, Then, Now, and Tomorrow. Professor Choi was formerly a professor of North American history at McGill University in Montreal. He also taught at Haifa University, the IBC in Herzliya, and the Rockford Program for Overseas Students at Hebrew University. Among many other awards, in 2017, Professor Choi was the winner of the 2017 Simon Rockower Award for Excellence in Commentary. Sitting next to him is Avraham Infeld, who is actually a native South African, immigrated to Israel in 1959. He is the founder and director of a succession of innovative educational institutions. He was the founding director of Birthright, president of Hillel International from 2006 to 2008, and today is a mentor for Tikkun Olam efforts within the Religious Institute. Avraham also founded Elites, a nonprofit educational service institution that fosters Jewish identity rooted in pluralistic understanding of Jewish life and the centrality of Israel. Among other honors, in 2005, Mr. Infeld was the first specialist in informal Jewish education to be awarded the Hebrew University of Jerusalem's prestigious Samuel Rothberg Prize for Jewish Education. If you want to read more, we have full bios on the next week. But otherwise, I would like to let the gentleman take it away. Thank you for coming.
With your permission, I want to start with I want to start with a little story. This is our second session. In the first session, I told a story. I told a story of my going to a friend's home who was sitting Shiva. And this friend has a 4-year-old or 4 or 5-year-old daughter. And when I walked into the room, this little 4 or 5-year-old daughter turned around to her father and said to her father, "Who's that? And do I love him?" I found that extremely touching. I found that, for me, very much being a description of what is this thing called peoplehood all about. Someone turned to me and said to me, and asked the question and made the comment, I was deeply affected by that story. I thought it was terrible. What do you mean she loved you? Because you're a member of her family, you're a member of her people, you're a member of a nation. You're supposed to love everyone. Now, I love anyone who's good. But I'd like to ask Professor Gill how he felt about that response, because you were in the room at the time.
Well, thank you. First of all, I have to correct the introduction. There's only one living giant in the room and one me. So let's be very, very clear. I have a healthy appreciation of my own insignificance.
I can now leave. That's what I came to hear, knowing it's not true at all.
And it really is an honor to
we are going to immodest each other out of business.
to share a stage with and learn with Avram. I wish I was surprised, but a similar story happened to me. I was at a conference of Israel educators 3 weeks ago in Chicago, and I was giving my introduction to my new book, The Zionist Ideas, and I was talking about nationalism, and I tried to touch on that this morning in my short introduction, and I said that nationalism is a neutral term. It can, in the 1940s, Jews experienced it at its absolute worst, at its absolute most lethal, at its absolute most evil, the Shoah. And in 1948, we experienced it at its most enlightening, most empowering, most liberating, with the establishment of the State of Israel. And I'm not willing to give Donald Trump the power, or anybody, to define nationalism with his gold tea or anybody or anything else. And we have to take back the night, and we have to define nationalism on our terms as liberal nationalism. And somebody came up to me and said, when you said that, and you said it in such an aggressive way, all I could think of was Donald Trump, Charlottesville, and Nuremberg. And I had also said that in my three-part, the way I do Z1, Z2, Z3 is I also do the founders, Z2 is the builders, and I call them the torchbearers. And I say, because what are the torchbearers? It's an Olympic relay. And aren't we, we're low, who are we? We're the torchbearers. We're heirs to this amazing tradition, this amazing conversation about Zionism. And our job is to keep the flame going. We might have to go to alternate sources of energy. But we have to, and it might get stronger, it might get weaker, but that's our job. And he said, that torch, all I could think of was Charlottesville. I said, well, I think that happened in the afternoon. But anyway, there are three things going on here that we have to talk about. One is we've forgotten how to listen generously. We listen censoriously. We listen waiting to be offended. And that is the opposite of education. That's the opposite of education. And I see it. I see it sometimes I'm speaking, and if I don't say it in the right way, I get the head nod, right? And I've lost you, right? Give me a break, right? Especially for those of us who don't, you want me to read from a piece of paper? But so that's one thing, and it's because we're so busy finger pointing and we're not listening. So that's the first thing I get from that story. But the second deeper issue is that nationalism has become a dirty word, especially in Blue America, and especially among Jews in Blue America, and especially among college students. And we tell our kids that you have to get into the right school, and we put so much pressure on them, and they finally get to that school, that holy piece of real estate, and what are they told? Nationalism is for boobs, and religion is for idiots. And we don't prepare them. So we have to prepare them, that's the second point. But the third point, and this is I think what we have to talk about, is I cannot explain, as an American historian, America without talking about nationalism. And to me, nationalism is Abraham Lincoln's mystic accords of memory and the better angels of our nature and our last best hope on earth. And I can't explain Zionism. We can't begin to talk about Zionism until we grapple with what that N-word means, nationalism. And that's what made us a Jewish state. Right? The classic Israeli song, you start walking, and then you feel like a person, you feel powerful. And that's how you become a nation. And that's the whole story of Jewish nationhood. And that's Zionism. And so this is where and this conference has to be about those basics. And I was frustrated that Yossi Beilin, it's very easy to get up in front of 1,100 American Jews and yell and scream about Gill and conversion. It's like shouting fire in a crowded theater. But we need to talk about difficult issues. Who are we? Let's open up the conversation and let's learn.
I asked him to answer because I knew what he was going to say. So I think he's quite right.
I didn't hear that. Say that again.
I think that we are dealing with a very, very serious problem. What is peoplehood for me? It's a term that's being thrown around, everyone's using it. Peoplehood is the only word I know that is inclusive of all Jews. There's no other description of who the Jews are that is all-inclusive. If I use the word nation to describe who the Jews are, I exclude most of you. You're not members of my nation. If I use the word religion, I exclude my father, the Jewish atheist, who was a Jewish atheist but always made a point of saying, I'm an atheist, Baruch Hashem. And when I asked him why, he always said, because whether you like it or not, God is an actor on the stage of the Jewish story. Whether you believe in him as the creator of the world, whether you believe in him as existing, whether you believe in him as a lawmaker, he is at least an actor on the stage of the Jewish people. My people as Jewish people have been having a love affair with God for 5,000 years. If I want to be in love with my people, I can't ignore this other love affair. I can fight it, I can argue with it, I can love it, I can dislike it, but I can't ignore it. So how did we get to the confusion that the Jewish people are now in? And I really feel sorry for Gill, for Professor Troy having to hear this again from me. I want to describe to you who the Jewish people are very, very quickly. They were a family that we're reading about in the Torah today. A family of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, their offsprings, Joseph and their children who become tribes, who stay in Egypt, who become eventually, because the Pharaoh was changed, become slaves in Egypt. From a family over the years that they were in Egypt, they become a tribe. They leave the land of Egypt. They walk through a desert. They come to a mountain. At this mountain, they meet with a being they called God. They signed a covenant with God. According to this covenant, you will be our God. We will be your people. You will look after us. You will take us into our land. You will give us rain in the right season. And we'll keep your commandments. Any Jew that I know until 250 years ago knew that he was a part of that group. He came out of Egypt, which is why on Passover we say every Passover, Chayav kol adam lir'ot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Each Jew must see themselves as if they personally came out of Egypt. By the way, have we ever met before? We were at Mount Sinai together.
You felt it.
I forgot.
I remember the guy you were sitting next to. I was very jealous. But anyway, I'm a part of that people. That people came into the land. God fulfilled his commitment to them. He took them into the land. He gave them rain. And they sinned. And God decided that he had to punish them. So they were punished and scattered among the nations of the earth. That was their punishment. And every Jew, until 250 years, would have gone on to say, and living outside of Israel is punishment. That's why they called it galut, exile. We were exiled from our land. And it's our role in life to keep ourselves distinct as a people, to keep God's commandments, and to hope and pray that one day God will forgive us. And if he forgave us, what will he do? He will send a Messiah, and this Messiah will take us back to the land of Israel. I don't know of a Jew until 250 years ago who understood being Jewish any other way. That's the way Jews understood themselves. Living outside of Israel is punishment. I was recently in Beverly Hills, California. I saw the suffering of my people. A terrible punishment. What happened? I mean, it's not punishment. Not being able to decide whether to swim in your indoor pool or your outdoor pool is not punishment. So what happened? That things changed for the Jewish people. Living outside of Israel was no longer punishment, was no longer exile. It became a fact of life. And Beverly Hills is pretty comfortable. You know what happened? French Revolution, democracy, modern liberalism, modern nationalism, all kinds of new ideas that spread through Europe. Europe, where most of the Jews live, changes. All of a sudden, the Jews waiting for the Messiah, instead of meeting the Messiah, they meet modernity. And this modernity, they're living in their ghettos, they're waiting for the Messiah, modernity comes, they watch as the walls of the ghetto get lower and lower and lower, they hear all kinds of sounds from outside the ghetto, and they have to respond to these sounds. Why are Jews not all the same as the way we were before? Because different Jews gave different responses to this meeting with modernity. Modernity said, Jews, stop being different. Some Jews said, no, I want to remain the way I was. I'm going to stay in my ghetto. I'm going to continue to wear a black hat and a black coat and continue to have 7 or 10 children in a family. I'm not changing. Leave me alone. As a matter of fact, if you're going to call me, if you're going to talk to me, and about liberalism and nationalism and modernity. You frighten me. In Hebrew, the word frighten is ani chared. I become a Haredi. And I go more deeply into my ghetto. There's one reaction of Jews. They're living, they're well, they're happy, they're very committed. They're a part of this Jewish world. There's another part that said, I'm also waiting 3,000 years for Messiah. He didn't come. I'm not waiting any longer. I'm getting beaten, murdered, and blamed for everything under the sun, and now modernity's come and I can leave my ghetto. I'm going goodbye, being Jewish. And here begins what we know today as assimilation. Jews stopping to be Jewish. A third reaction, in my opinion, the largest reaction said, I know that there are some scholars who disagree with me about this being the largest reaction. I recognize their right to be wrong. This reaction said, you know what? They're right. I can leave the ghetto. I can wear jeans. I can talk their language. I can become one of them. I can become citizens in their countries. But I can't accept their God. So I'm going to be different from you by religion only. And for the first time in Jewish history, the equation Judaism equals religion was created only 250 years ago. We are not a religion. By the way, I'm going to use that later on when I talk to you. So you'll hear the story anyway. Judaism is not a religion. But they created and understood Judaism as a religion. At the same time, America is being created. America believes in freedom of religion. What a wonderful message. What a wonderful mix. Jews who think that Judaism is a religion, a country that's being created which has freedom of religion at its core. What a wonderful get-together. They create the American Jewish community. There was a fourth reaction. Many Jews tried to assimilate and did not succeed in assimilating. They did not succeed in assimilating because there is a distinction between a law which says you're equal and your next door neighbor accepting you as equal. Many Jews tried to assimilate, could not assimilate. They said, what's going on over here? I was willing to give up everything and become one of them. They're going to accept me. And they create a very unique reaction which says, Mr. Non-Jew, if I cannot become one of you, I'm going to become just like you. You took the laws of modern nationalism and applied the laws of modern nationalism to yourselves. I am going to take the laws of modern nationalism and apply them to the Jewish people. I'm going to turn the Jews from being a people into being a nation. Beginning of modern Zionism. An amazingly successful movement that within 50 years manages to create a state, manages to create a Zionist movement, but does not manage to turn the Jews into from a people into a nation because some Jews still think it's a religion. Other Jews are still living in the ghetto, and other Jews are still assimilating. But for that group that was willing to accept the nationalist response to modernity, we created the State of Israel. There's only one Zion, I'm going to tell Yossi Beilin. That Zionism is the name of a mountain that happens to be in Jerusalem. It's in the Middle East. And we're going back home, we're going there, and they went, these Zionists, that's how Zionism was created. And we have a problem. Jews are no longer uniform. And I don't believe we're ever going to be uniform. I am not going to be the guy who asked me that question about how horrible it is that this little girl said she loves me. I'm never going to become that. I'm not going to become an American reform rabbi. Most of you, I don't know why, I have a feeling in my guts very strongly that most of you are not going to become ultra-Orthodox Jews tomorrow morning. We are not going to all be the same. But the Jewish people cannot survive without being unified. So the real challenge facing the Jewish people and the need for the concept of Jewish peoplehood is it offers a potential for the Jews to be united without being uniform, being unified without being uniform. In other words, I accept within my understanding of what it means to be a Jew, somebody who may have a different understanding of what it means to be a Jew. And I'm willing to accept. Now, the moment I do that, I have to find something that includes all of us. None of the other terms the Jews use to describe themselves is all-inclusive. Jewish peoplehood is all-inclusive. Why am I thrilled about this conference? Because this is a conference devoted to Jewish people, devoted to Jewish peoplehood, devoted to enabling us to be something within which we are not all the same, but we are at least unified. That's why I'm excited about this conference. 1,000 Jews, 1,075 registered in Palo Alto. My God, this isn't Jerusalem. In Palo Alto. Wow. For me, that's what Jewish peoplehood is all about. I'm a Zionist. The Zionism that I was brought on is based on the condition of the Jews at the end of the 19th century. I would like to create a new Zionism that is based on the condition of the Jews in the 21st century. That will talk about our being a people that has a relationship with the land of Israel, and around that build this new Zionism. What's it going to be? That's what the entire conference is about, and what the movement that we create is going to have to talk about. I'd like to hear.
So Avraham just gave you a marvelous sweep of Jewish history and where Zionism fits in, really from Sinai to the Sinai campaign and the Six-Day War, in a sense. Let me take the American Jewish thread. When I grew up in Salma Schechter School of Queens, sorry, I'm a New Yorker, we sang in 1492, Columbus was a Jew, he spoke some Yiddish and made the Kiddush in 1492. And you're looking at the man who interpreted Chaim Solomon in the 4th grade of the Salma Schechter School play. Now, when I got to Harvard University and I was studying for my PhD in American history, I went to Bernard Bailyn, who was the most famous American historian of his day, and I said, who is Chaim Solomon? He goes, I have no idea. And I looked at all the books that I had about American history, and Chaim Solomon barely appears, but we know that he was the Jew who financed the American Revolution. What do those two stories teach us? God bless America. America is special. America says we can belong. America says we can find our place. My name is Gill Troy, right? It's true, my Christian name is Gilad, and my father was Troyansky, and we had an anskiectomy, right? And that means that I get great reception at Greek restaurants. I get a lot of Helen of Troy jokes. It means that when I was teaching at Harvard, in the Revolutionary Transformation of America course, there was a guy named Richard John, and you know how WASPs have first names that are last names and last names are first names, and he looked at Troy Gill, Gill Troy. He said, oh, there's so few WASPs like us around nowadays. And I put on my heaviest New York accent and said, even fewer than you think. But, and when I taught at McGill University—
You know what an Israeli WASP is? A white Ashkenazi Sabra with protection.
and what I wanted to fit in. You see, I don't like to be one of those Zionists who says, no, I have it all figured out. I have my identity conflicts. I liked fitting in. I liked getting up at McGill University and professing as Gill Troy, American historian. I liked the fact that students would come up to me and go, Professor Troy, we're going to take off the next 2 nights, as if we meet at night, right? But they're so nervous because they're speaking to Herr Professor. And I go, why? And they go, well, we're going home to Toronto. There are always these Toronto students. They're so cute. For Passover. And I go, are you going to make sure that you catch up with the work? And they go, yeah. I said, could you do one more thing for me? I go, yes. I said, could you have a Chag Sameach? Oh, I didn't know he was Jewish. But America let us do that. But in doing that, we also had to accept the Judeo-Christian embrace. The Judeo-Christian embrace meant that we're just a religion. It meant that that Hebrew word for religion, dati, which actually it's a word of Persian origin, it's made up, became who we are. And think about it, that's the story. So, and that, of course, and to make it even more complicated. So one, we want to fit in. 2, what's the big story in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s? It's not this story of these poor nudniks, these schnooks who go off to Palestine from Eastern Europe. It's the immigration, 2 million Jews coming on the boat with Barbara Streisand, right? Thinking there was enough room to go like this on the boat, right? I mean, there was awful, difficult conditions. But you get there. You get there, and what do you find? What do you find? You're in the, what did they call it? The Golden Medina? We're getting to the Zionist part in a second. But the American story is it's the Golden Medina, and Mary Anton writes a book called The Promised Land. So every one of us, if you call yourself an American Zionist, we have dueling promised lands within us. Every American historian I know, no matter how left-wing
or Herbert's Jew, Christian, Muslim.
Right, right. Every
Protestant Catholic.
Every American Jew historian I know, no matter how left-wing they are, no matter how anti, they think the natural flow of history is from the old world to the, and every Zionist believes that it's from the diaspora to the center. That's where the diaspora comes in. So we have these ideological conflicts, and now it gets even worse because in the now I'm jumping ahead, that's the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s. And then so what's the model? We'll do one more step on that. The model is, look, on the top of that, we're a little concerned about anti-Semitism and dual loyalty. I'm a real American. I don't want to have a Jewish state. That'll confuse me. Peoplehood, nationhood. I don't want to get into that. I'm just trying to make a living. But
hold it, Mr. Jew by religion. I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
If you're a Jew by religion, it's your religion, right?
Why
aren't you sending missionaries to Africa?
Why am I?
Why are you not sending? All other religions are sending missionaries to Africa.
But this is Tikkun Olam.
You're sending Chabad to Los Angeles.
But this is the new thing, right? We've now created your friend who asked you that question wants you to be sending. He wants you to be going to Africa.
He wants to go to Africa, but not to missionarize them.
No, he wants.
Religions are supposed to be missionarizing, and we don't.
True, because I've
got another question.
Because we're traumatized.
You're a religion? Ha! What right does a religion have to have a state?
We think.
What's going on here?
This is our educational problem. Do you know how many of our kids think that the Jewish state is a theocracy? Because they're just told that.
You're told you're a religion and then you've got a state. It makes no sense.
This is the Zionist conversation we need to be having, not Yossi Beilin's conversation about how evil Israel is. Even though I want to get to criticism of Israel. But first we have the conversation more fundamentals. We have an ideological problem here, folks.
And you're a religion? Which one of the two of us is wearing a kippah?
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. So that's it. American Jews put on their census, right, religion, but they're actually peoplehood.
Right.
They're truly Zionists. This is our powerful.
You know where I was at 7 o'clock this morning? In Shul. And Judaism's not a religion.
And this is our opportunity.
Yeah.
Because to the extent that people don't understand the power of peoplehood, to the extent that American Jews don't understand that we are actually, in our DNA, more peoplehood than a religion, we can actually join the Zionist conversation. And this is the kind of back and forth that we need to be having, and we're not having it. And you know why? Because we're afraid of our kids. We're afraid of this is what I've discovered in my travels around America. Most American parents are afraid of their kids.
You want to know something? I'm afraid of my kids. I'm afraid for my kids because if I talk about diaspora Jews being as good as Israeli Jews, my kids may go and live with them.
So what do we do?
I don't know. So how do we talk about this?
So how do we have balance?
We talk about this. We create peoplehood, and we talk to each other, and we have conversation.
This is unplanned, but this is it.
By the way, this is totally unplanned.
This is it.
I've never met him before.
The truth is, he wanted to have coffee in Jerusalem and plan this out, and the opportunity to sit with Avraham Infeld for coffee, I said no, because we'll ruin the spontaneity. And I said that?
Yeah.
So we're having a spontaneous moment.
I've never, ever had a cup of coffee in my life, by the way. I would have had tea.
Because he's proper. Now, one more dimension of this to make this even more complicated. Right now, on the university campuses, in the postmodern world, what are we told? Nationalism is for boobs, religion is for idiots. Any boundaries are by definition evil. The American Jewish community is trying to create a sociological anomaly. A community with no red lines on intermarriage, no red lines on Israel, no red lines anywhere. And that's what you were being asked about.
Wow, that's what the rabbi was saying to me.
That's what he said.
You can't love someone because they're a Jew. You've got to love them because they're a person.
Because you have to be so open-minded.
Because they're a human being.
Because any boundaries, by definition, lead to Donald Trump. No, I'm serious. That's the new logic, right? Any boundaries are necessarily Brexit, white nationalism, Donald Trump. And that's going to kill us as Americans, let alone as Zionists.
And I, the only one in this room who doesn't have an accent, South African? Oh.
Yeah, but probably Johannesburg, Cape Town, you'll get into that old division.
It's not a division. Cape Town doesn't count.
You see? Look at that. You see? We're all true.
Johannesburg burger.
Ah,
I'm on it.
we're all tribal.
When I heard Donald Trump say, I am a nationalist, I went mad. Because I grew up in South Africa, where in 1948, when the Jewish state was created, the Nationalist Party came to power in South Africa, created apartheid, created racism. Nationalism equaled racism. That's why when I hear the word nationalism, I automatically translate it into Hebrew. But in Hebrew, there are two words for nationalism. The one word in Hebrew is le'umi, and the other word is lu'umani. And there are two different understandings. I hate people who are lu'umani. I love people who are lu'umi. How do I get my Jewish people to understand that distinction?
And when I heard Donald Trump say, I am a nationalist, use it, I was upset because he was hijacking a term that he doesn't own. That is, as I said at the beginning, a neutral term. And so we can't let, and shame on the right for defining it in a certain way, and shame on the left for abdicating. Shame on the left for giving it up. We can't afford to do that. I don't care where you stand on Donald Trump. This is not an issue about his policies. This is an issue about nationalism as a useful tool. It's the way we organize, what's it called, the United Nations? 193 countries in the United Nations. So we have to have a conversation about nationalism. We have to have a conversation about boundaries. We have to have a conversation about preference. And we have to have a conversation about Zionism. And two moves, if I may. One, on Zionism, what were we back in the day? We were the Zionists. We were uncomfortable, right? And this is what the Pittsburgh platform of the Reform movement was saying in the 1880s. We're not a people. We are a religion, and we don't want to have this connection to that place. We don't want to recreate the rights of the temple in Palestine. And it took the Shoah, the Holocaust, and the Columbus platform for all of a sudden them to say, no, we are a people because we feel that connection, and we also know we're a shared target. So what was the definition of a Zionist, the old line thing? I'm going to be politically incorrect. You know those light bulb jokes, right? How many therapy patients does it take to screw in a light bulb? You can only change if you are ready to change. How many gurus does it take to screw in a light bulb? You don't need to screw in a light bulb. You just have your inner light. How many men does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one, and he thinks the whole world revolves around him, so he doesn't have to move. How many feminists does it take to screw in a light bulb? That's not funny, right? How many Zionists? I had to do the man one so I wouldn't be accused of being. How many Zionists does it take to screw in a light bulb? One, to turn the light bulb. Two, as Avraham was talking about at the beginning, to jump around and dance and sing, saying, finally we're returning to our land and returning to our heritage and returning to our nation. That's 1, 2, and 3. The fourth, to write the check. And the fifth, of course, to complain about the media coverage. But the check writing was the job of the American Jewish community. And now it's changing. Now it has to be much more of a partnership. And that's what we're looking for your leadership on.
But I want to tell you why why I need the partnership. Because I come to this country often. I was the international president of Hillel. I don't know how that happened. The first and only Israeli ever to hold that job. I was based in Washington working with your kids. I was troubled about a lot of things, but I loved Jewish pluralism. I fell in love with it. I used to spend some Shabbases going from a Reform synagogue to a conservative synagogue to an Orthodox synagogue to get a taste of each of them. And I don't have it at home. I have a religious authority that is controlling religion in Israel. And if I look at my other Israeli friends, they are Jews by law. Shabbat is a law. Kosher food in the army is a law of the state. Whom you marry is by law. And it's funny, I feel so much happier with Jewish life in America. And I want it in Israel. I can't get it in Israel without you. That's why I need you. That's why we have to be one people. You know, there are two phrases in the ethics of the fathers next to one next to the other. The one says, Asay Toratcha Keva. Make your learning of Torah something permanent. 2 lines later, it says, Al ta'as tfilatcha kefa. Don't make your prayer permanent. Judaism has always had the sense of permanency and, what's the word I'm looking for? Starting with an S. Spontaneity. There's always a combination of fix and spontaneity. In Israel, everything's fixed. In America, everything's spontaneous. I mean, I've heard rabbis give you a speech about why you should be Jewish. It's healthy. It's good for your figure. All kinds of reasons. In Israel, it's by law. You guys don't have enough fix, and I don't have anywhere near enough spontaneity. I can only get that if we're one people. Your turn.
That's our challenge. Is it time for questions, or do we have one more round?
We have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. So maybe we should take questions. Because we could keep on going doing this. I'm having so much fun. So.
We've really never done this, and I want you to know, if any of you... I think we're going to patent this, and we're going to travel the world.
Take it away. Questions?
I don't live down here. I live in Berkeley, and we have a very different feeling there. I don't feel very confident about the Jews' future in America because I live in a place where I'm scared. I was scared when my kids were small to let them wear Hebrew on their T-shirts. Now my son just finished in the army 2.5 years, so I'm not scared anymore. But I don't think that they're going to be 2 Jewish communities for as long as you seem to think. I think we're all going to end up in Israel eventually.
You are such a South African. What movement were you a member of in South Africa? Habonim?
I was nominally Orthodox, but no movement.
Were you B'nai Akiva?
No.
You're probably a Litvak family.
You have a 90% chance of being right.
Everybody in South Africa is a member of a tribe. There are 14 black tribes. There were 3 white tribes, the Boer, the Englishman, the Jew. But the Jews were also divided into 2 tribes, the Litvaks and the not Litvaks. I come from a non-Litvak family. That's why I love talking to an audience which has South Africans, because the Litvaks never let me open my mouth in South Africa. A good Galiciana. There's something worse than a Galiciana. 2 Galicianas.
I'll answer your question when so. Ask your question, I'll put the 2 together.
Questions? Any more questions?
Yes.
We'll come back.
So we're talking about peoplehood, but I feel like, and you, as former head of Birthright, I just heard the head of education for Birthright talking about millennials and the way the education needs to change for them when they come to Israel. And what he talked about was the need to be able to answer the question, why be Jewish? What's the purpose that we're trying to instill in young people about why being Jewish is important? And maybe we need to get to that before we talk about peoplehood.
I don't really believe that that's the question. He wasn't the head of education in my time, and I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's doing a job, but I don't think that's the real question. I think the question is, why aren't we showing young Jews how exciting it can be to be Jewish? Because you cannot answer the question why, because there is no reason to be. You can be something else. It's maybe worth it to be Jewish because you can find something of value in it. So maybe let me talk to you about what I find in being Jewish, what it says to me, why it's important to me, why my 4 children, my 16 grandchildren, the first 3 of my planned 64 great-grandchildren are all heavily involved in being Jewish. Why? What is it that bonds us? What is it that it gives us? What is it that, what are the discussions that go around the dining room table? What is there in the language we speak as Jews that is different from the rest of the world? Why does an American say, I fall in love? You ever heard that phrase, to fall in love? You heard of it? What nonsense. I'm an expert in the field of love. You don't fall in love, you rise in love. We don't say to fall in love in Hebrew. You can say to fall in love in Hebrew. We say in Hebrew, lehit ahev. It's a unique grammatical form called hitpa'el, which is always reflexive. To write is lichtov. To correspond is in this grammatical form, lehit katev. Lehov is to love, but to fall in love is lehit ahev. It depends on both sides. How come the word for, you heard the Hebrew word kadima? What does it mean? Forward? If that's kadima, you know what that is? Kodem. Huh? Listen carefully. It's the same word. We have a culture that tells us our future is dependent on a long line that came before us. It's exciting. Know about it. I can't explain to him why to be Jewish. I can show him why it can be exciting to be Jewish. But maybe you just...
Well, to link the two questions, if I felt that we had done a really good job educationally with our kids, on both the Israel issue and on the Jewish issue, I'd say, you know what, we failed, and they're going in their own direction, and that's it. But I go to Jewish day schools, I go to Jewish homes, and I don't think we're doing a good job. That's what I meant about we're afraid of our kids. We're not, I agree with Avraham, first modeling, right? What's more important, the golf course or the Hebrew school? What's more important, the celebration of Israel or just being traumatized by the latest headline of anti-Semitism? If we have a Judaism that's filled with joy and not oi, if we have a Judaism that is part of a Jewish journey, if we have a Judaism that shows, I'm giving you an amazing opportunity, you're not just a lonely dot in the universe, but you're part of this proud tradition. You're rooted in something that doesn't just go decades. When I teach American history, I'm in 20s and 30s and 40s and 60s and 80s. When I'm in America, when I'm in the UK, we're in the centuries. When I'm in Israel, I'm in the millennia. There's something really powerful about that. And on top of that, we have this. We also have this. We have community. And so I say, bless you, my children. We're so lucky to be rooted, and we're so lucky to be connected. And that's our gift, and we're not articulating that to our kids. And so yes, when we're happier going into anti-Semitic Jew mode, we're happier into the traumatized Jew space, right? And we use that to try to raise consciousness. That's not my Zionism. My Zionism is an identity Zionism. My Zionism is how proud we are, how lucky we are to be a part of this family. And if we do the right job, celebrating it ourselves, making those kind of commitments. Look, I'm going to be honest here. Look at the average age here, right? So let's reach out to the young.
I'd suggest you change the subject.
And I travel around. I'm invited. And we do all kinds. You know, lots of people are buying my book, but they're all 50 and up. And I'm happy to, keep on buying the book. But let's reach out to the young people, and let's have a conversation about Israel that's alive, that's vital, that's vibrant, that's dynamic, that makes me want to be a part of it, not run away from it.
He made a plug for his book. I got to make a plug for my book.
It's an amazing memoir.
But I want to tell you, my book is called A Passion for a People. It's passion. Be passionate about being Jewish. Passion is what turns people on. Passion touches people's hearts. I don't want you to be Jewish because they tried to kill us. I want you to be Jewish because it's worthwhile living.
Amen.
Avraham.
We have a question here. Oh, sorry.
I interviewed a number of administrators of education, and each one of them told me that when they teach Torah, the kids say, I don't want to study Torah because I have personal problems that I have to solve first. Tell me why Judaism is important to me, and then I will take the rest.
I can show you what's important to you. I can tell you. That's the difference between Judaism. It's not what I can tell, it's what I can show. We tell stories. Judaism is a culture of storytelling, a culture of living experiences. So I want to tell you a story. I was a shaliach in a city called Baltimore, Maryland. Anybody from Baltimore? I was in Baltimore, Maryland, 51 years ago. And my father comes to visit me in Baltimore while I'm a shaliach. And there's a place in Baltimore called Park Heights Avenue. Park Heights Avenue is where the Jews live. It's Jewville. And you go for a walk along, and every few meters there's a bench. And the bench is donated by Levinson's Funeral Home. It's an investment in their forthcoming clients, that they'll have somewhere to sit. And it says Levinson's Funeral Home. My father says to me, what's a funeral home? We don't have funeral homes in South Africa. We have Chevra Kadisha. We don't have funeral homes. My father says to me, what's a funeral home? I said, Dad, in America, everything's privatized, even death. It's a privatized Chevra Kadisha. That's what's a funeral home. My father stops and says, you know what? I have no idea what you're doing in Baltimore. But if you can get, you will succeed if you can get Mr. Levinson to change the name of his institution from funeral home to Graduating Institute from Jewish Education. Why am I saying this? Because all of us are talking about, how do I talk about being Jewish to our kids? You won't have to talk about being Jewish to your kids if you talk about being Jewish to yourselves. If you search for a way in your own lives to model being Jewish, you won't have a problem of talking to your kids about it. I'm not saying that you will avoid intermarriage, by the way. America is America. Intermarriage is going to happen in America. But I want to tell you, look what I look like, right? We have to sit down and figure out how can we prevent intermarriage. Not how can we prevent intermarriage, we can't do that. But how can we prevent intermarriage from necessarily being assimilation? Not easy to swallow. I don't know where feels about it.
I think we have to also reframe the conversation. The authority figure doesn't work anymore. So
no, you can't.
You should not, thou shalt not doesn't work. But to have an educational goal of saying, I could not, or I choose not to, I prefer not to intermarry because I want to build a Jewish home and two is better than one. And because I want to be a part of this. And it doesn't guarantee.
But what do you do when it happens? When it happens,
right. That's
you have
the second
to be able to intervene and say, I'm going to help it not be assimilated.
But it's like what I was saying about education. I felt if we had done a better job of even first having the conversation in a more thoughtful way, in a more open way, in a more exciting way, in a more inspiring way, then I'd say, okay, we failed, but we haven't done that. We've got to do our homework. I'm getting we have, okay, over here.
My name is Mike Lefkowitz, and...
Wait, after this question, the audience can leave. I want to continue, just the two of us. Yeah, what was the question?
I've had the privilege of knowing you, Avraham, for many years personally, and...
Is that Mike speaking?
Yeah.
I can hear the voice.
You become my teacher. The first thing I learned from you was, the question is, what is the mission of the Jewish people? And I don't hear enough about that. Could you...
Well, here I want to, I don't know if we're going to be differ or not. My forefather, Abraham, not me, the other one, has a discussion with God. And God says to Abraham three things. Go home and build a family. Build a family. I know your wife's already 100 years old, but I'll help you. Build a family. Secondly, Lech lecha me'artzecha lemoladetcha. Go from your land to your homeland. We, after the Holocaust, the Jewish people had to rebuild our family, and we went back to our homeland. But there was a third thing that God said, and that was, V'nivrechu bachem kol mishpachot hadama. And may all the peoples of this earth be blessed by your presence. We have got to make sure that we get involved in making this a better world, and not only a better world for Jews, a better world for humanity. We're not Jewish in order to have a quarter of a chicken on Friday night. We're Jewish in order to make this a better world.
David Ben-Gurion called it Am Skula. And he says it's not a chosen people, but it's a treasured people. He says there's no good translation into English. He was actually quite the scholar. He said there's no good translation, but it's a nation that has a sense of how its special mission to humanity and its special mission to itself. And then people said to David Ben-Gurion in the 1960s, they go, well, look at this country. has it fulfilled your dreams? And he said, not yet. And we all have to be not yetters. And when we're saying not yet, we're saying, I'm not giving up on Israel because I don't like it, because I don't like this policy or that policy. That only happens in the delegitimization derby with Israel. Right now, we're living through what I'm calling the Trump opportunity. 80% of the American Jewish community hates Donald Trump, detests Donald Trump, abhors Donald Trump. I call my friend and I say, how's the weather in New York? He says, did you see his latest tweet? But they're not moving to Canada, the capital of niceness, and they're not moving to Israel. They're staying here. And that's what November 2018 was all about. So why do we give up on Israel and we don't give up on America? We can't afford to give up on America as American Jews. And we have to make America, by the way, we have to make Israel as central to us, so we can't give up on Israel too. And once we can't give up on it, then we work to improve it, to extend it, and to understand, not yet.
And even criticize it.
Absolutely.
But you don't have to criticize like a mother-in-law. You can criticize like a mother.
Or like a mother in love.
Or mother-in-love. But one of the reasons that it wasn't enough in Ben-Gurion's time is that Ben-Gurion lived before the Z3 conference in Palo Alto. Everything's going to change now. Thank you all.
Thank you.